Hi, Michael. Good morning, everyone. This is Joyce Odidison. I'm hosting our Workplace Wellness Forum. I'm so happy to have Michael Levitt here. Michael will be one of the speakers at the Global Workplace Wellness Summit. Michael, I'm so excited that you're here with us. Tell us a little bit about you and what you're working on right now. I think the audience wants to know, who is Michael Levitt and why should I come to the summit and listen to him talk? What is he going to be? What does he bring to the summit that I should be excited about?
Well, thank you, Joyce, and thank you, everybody, for attending this session and the session that's coming up later on this year. Michael Levitt, I'm the Chief Burnout Officer of the Breakfast Leadership Network, and we're an organization that works with teams and individuals on burnout prevention. Unfortunately, ends up being burnout recovery most of the time. We also are content creators, so media. We have a podcast show. I write books and do a lot of different things that keeps me somewhat out of trouble. But the premise of everything that I do is around burnout. And I had my own burnout journey back in 2009. And after recovering from a really tough year of my life, rebuilt my life and learned what burnout was all about, and most importantly, how to look for it and how to prevent it. And that's how I've lived my life since. And now I work with others to make sure that they can prevent burnout in their own life and avoid what I like to refer to as a year of worst case scenarios.
That is so important, Michael. I've had so many opportunities to speak to clients about burnout. And I think as I speak to you, a client will say to me, one of my clients now, and she says, as a parent, as, with homeschooling and working from home, it is so easy to work too much. So what would be an answer? What would be some sort of support that you would give a client who faces such an issue?
Well, we've seen since the pandemic started, and this is a US number, in Canada it's a little bit better, but in US numbers, the average American is working 3 more hours a day than before COVID-19 hit. So basically, what a lot of people have done is they've traded their commute time to work. So instead of having that hour and a half commute each way to work, which is typically the average for a lot of people, they just start working and they don't shut off. And of course,
Mm.
for many of us, we became full-time school teachers as well, and that tossed that into working that you normally have to do. You're working in a situation that isn't your normal work environment.
Mhm.
Your kitchen table or countertop or bed or couch is not your normal working environment that many people are used to. So we've had to adapt along the way, and that adds stress and a lot of pressure on things. Uh, But the answer for people that I talk to and work with on this is you have to set boundaries around your time. You cannot work from 6 a.m. to midnight 7 days a week. That's just not sustainable. You need to have communication with your loved ones, your family, your children's teachers, your bosses, everybody, and say, capacity is only going to be so much here. And organizations, if you have employees that have school age children, you need to factor that in. This is the normal situation that we're all facing right now, is we're all in this pandemic. So we need to ease up a little bit as an employer on work times and things like that, and let people just kind of figure all of this out. Now we're a few months into it, and some are getting their gears and they're getting a little bit more organized on things. But for many people, it's still a big stress. And for me, I tell people you need to establish boundaries around when you work and when you don't. You need to have a hard time when you shut off work. The thing that bothers me that I see some employers doing is their employees would work the typical 9 to 5 type of thing before COVID-19, and now they're working later at night. And my question is, why? What's going on that you need to do this? And in many cases, unfortunately, it boils down to managers not being comfortable not seeing their employees.
Mm.
They don't trust their employees to do their job if they're quote unquote at home. Well, they're working, things are getting done, let them do their job. And if you don't, then you're a micromanager, and that's not a good thing. I'm dead set against micromanagement. I get really upset about it. And when I have stories of managers requiring people to be constantly connected. I want you on Zoom call, your camera on all the time. Those are managers that, quite frankly, and I'll step on my soapbox here, are lousy managers. They shouldn't be managing because they don't know how to. Assign tasks to your employees, give them the opportunity to do their job, be available if they have questions, and then get the heck out of their way. Let them do their job. And what it's done, this pandemic, is brought to light a lot of these bad management techniques that we've seen in the workforce, where other people, there's a client of mine that, they've basically virtualized their entire operation. They have a weekly check-in call to see how things are going, and they communicate via email. Are those people, for the most part, sitting home sometimes and watching Netflix and things? Yeah. Are they still getting paid? Yeah. Why? They're getting their job done. And it's my hope with all of this is there will be a shift from this punch in, punch out, time clock, time sheet type of mentality for many industries, and switch it to, what's your job? Okay, your social media. All right. Then tweet and post things on Instagram and Facebook throughout the day. I'm not going to tell you what times a day to do it, but get it done. If you get all your work done in 4 hours and we're quote unquote paying you for 8, congratulations. You're efficient at what you do. Don't overload that person with additional 4 hours because you're going to burn them out. Switch it from this by the hour type of mentality to by the job mentality. And that's why you saw so many people, even before the pandemic, move to the quote unquote gig economy, where people were leaving organizations saying, I'm just going to work for myself, and contract with organizations, say, I'm going to do tasks and jobs, and not have this by the hour mentality that so many people have had. It's an old industrial age methodology that doesn't work in most of our organizations today.
Michael, that is such an insightful thing when you talk about moving from that hourly mentality, because we know everything is mindset. And when we work with leaders, it's about changing that mindset and giving them the opportunity to see things through different lenses. And yes, they have this idea that you can come to work for 8 hours as long as you're here. You're working. Even if you did nothing all day besides stare at your screen, you're here and I can see you. And that means I'm doing my job as a manager and you can work. And I think it's also giving, I think it goes even higher than that to the leaders in the organization, to the whole construct of the organization, the system, to stop this hourly thinking to what are the tasks that needs to be done, how efficiently are they being done, what are the results. And as a coach, that is one of the things I hear from organizations often. My leaders cannot set goals and show, be accountable for the results. And that's because their whole idea of working is, I show up for 8 hours, but what did you get done? Did you do your best to get your task done? I don't want to know how many hours it takes. Less is better, and that should be a reward. I think when organizations are looking, oh, can you help us to do something for employee engagement and productivity, uh, really, that's the answer.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
reward, if you do it faster, you have more time off. Good for you.
Yeah, it's a great mentality, and I think one of the things, and this goes back to my career when I was in IT management, assigning tasks to people, and there was always a couple people in the department that were deemed quote unquote lazy, and that was not my descriptor for that person. It was, the talk and the gossip within the organization.
Mhm. Yeah.
But here's the thing: they still got their job done, and they were a lot of times lazy about it. So if there was a new project or new task that needed to be implemented, from time to time, I would give it to the lazy person, because, and of course, we would document all of their steps, because I figured because they're so lazy, they would do the steps, the minimum number of steps, in order to get the job done. So all of a sudden, from a lean methodology, which I've got my certification in lean,
Mhm.
I'm one to say, okay, if you can do it in 3 steps instead of 10, do it in 3 if you can, if it makes sense, because then
Mhm.
all of a sudden you saved 7 steps to do whatever, staring at a wall or being creative and being more efficient at things. You know, to piggyback on what you just said, reward that type of mentality of going, we did this in 3 steps. There's
Absolutely.
cost savings in there. They may not be concrete visible at the point, but the fact that it took that person less time to accomplish something, you saved 7 pointless steps that didn't need to be taken. And then all of a sudden you start replicating that as a methodology of all the things you do in your organization. Next thing you know, you're more efficient, you're doing things with less, and you're able to have an environment where people will have that extra time instead of spending on those 7 steps. They have time to be creative and think, okay, what can we do more efficiently here? And if there's anybody that can figure that out, is the people that are doing it, because they would love to figure out a way to do whatever they do in less steps.
Absolutely. And as you say that, I started thinking of the reduced stress and wear on and tear on people, because we know even things like carpal tunnel syndrome happen because people are the wear and tear of working over time. And they tell you, and one of the things we do at Interpersonal Wellness Services, we help to reduce that stress, that burnout, that overwhelm that comes from being stuck. And like you, we're looking at creating wellness in the workplace. And part of wellness is the dialogue, the conversation that we're having about it, the way we think about it. We think of it joyfully. Oh, I can get this done. Oh, in these 3 steps.
Mhm.
Just the energy of that versus, oh, this is going to take me 5 days. Already you're setting up yourself for negative energy, negative results, and you're depleting the positive energy in the environment, because everything is energy, and that affects one person, two persons, three persons. The whole team is now infected with that negative energy because this one person is thinking of how overwhelming, versus someone is saying, oh, here, we can do it a lot quicker, and here's how we do it. And that brings energy, that brings enthusiasm, that brings positivity, and that's well-being. That's what we want to have in the workplace.
It's crucial, and it's exciting, and it's contagious. It's
It is.
where people, when they recognize, wow, that person did that, and they can think, okay, I can do something like that, and then I can get accolades. Everyone loves to be praised. I mean, even the most introverted of introverts
Mhm.
does like receiving praise. Now, of course, they don't want to do it in front of 50 people, but they do enjoy getting praise and a
Absolutely.
job well done. Um, acknowledgement for the work that we're doing, and having an environment where that is the norm and not the exception, it makes it so much better. And that's when you have less turnover, that's when you have reduced stress.
Exactly.
Burnout is not an issue.
Yeah.
Where you have the flip side of it, where organizations that are constantly high stress, high pressure, and it's coming from the top, because oftentimes I see the executives are the ones that are burning out, and unfortunately that flows down throughout the organization. And then you have an organization that is making more mistakes, higher turnover, more absenteeism,
Mhm.
reluctance to do things. They're doing the less steps, but not because they want to be efficient, just because they don't feel like doing it at all. And what happens with that is, now you have an organization that's providing a product or service to its customers, and those customers are not getting a really good product now because of the burnout within the organization. It
Mhm.
has such a huge ripple effect on all kinds of aspects, not just the individual, but their families, their coworkers, their organizations, their clients, society.
Mhm.
It's a horrible thing to face and see, and it has such a huge impact on so many people that if you can address it and correct it, it makes it so much better for that individual and everyone in their life.
Absolutely. And there's that energy. One of the things that we talk about is that social vibration that comes with everything we do. It starts with a thought. And if we're thinking positively, we do our work more with a happier mood, and it has greater impact, and our customer service is better, more pleasant. And I think sometimes that's overlooked. It's
Yeah.
overlooked in the organization. One of my clients now in my that I'm working with, she talks about um, in a workplace where her boss is Caucasian and she is a minority woman. And he makes some odd comments about her choices, her lifestyle. Is she if she makes choices based on a culture that's different from others? Well, nobody else does it that way. I've never seen anyone done it that way, or choose, and so almost oblivious to the impact that this is having on the person's energy, enthusiasm, willingness. And it's funny because I had to do a survey on, a little assessment on his level of influence and impact on her. And it was so sad. The person that you're living with and working with on a daily basis have had such negative impact on your well-being. And there is so much of that can lead to burnout, disinterest in your work, not wanting to put your best effort forward. And I think sometimes leaders are not aware as to how intricate that is for employees.
Yeah, it can be a simple comment which they think is harmless that can be just devastating for the person for a variety of reasons. One, it could bring back a past memory or situation that that employee had at another employer, and all of a sudden
Hmm.
they're having flashbacks, and all of a sudden as an employee they're apprehensive to do anything and not be themselves, and that's the worst situation. Is I hear people say, well, I had to put on my work face today and then I got to go, at home. And I always tell people, see, you're one person, you're one being, you should be comfortable at home and at work. Now, of course, yeah, there's, societal things that you
Hmm.
should do at work, and we
Hmm.
we understand those. That's
Hmm.
what HR is for, to let us know, what we can get away with and what we can't. Uh, but
Absolutely.
but at the end of the day, you don't want to have to dread going to work, because
Yes.
that impacts your sleep, that impacts your, you know,
Hmm.
ability to digest, gives you
Hmm.
health problems, um, maybe premature hair loss, who knows,
Hmm.
it's
Oh,
all,
yeah,
all of these things play a factor. And
they do.
I've been fortunate, especially in working in Toronto, of working in a very diverse community where, in a medical clinic that I worked at a few years ago, we had people there that spoke 16 different languages. And I tell you what, the potluck lunches were off the chart, because everyone was tasked, okay, bring a dish that would be made from, either, if you're not originally from Canada, your home country, or from your heritage of
Hmm.
your background. It was amazing food, and my taste buds didn't know what to do, because it was just getting bombarded with all of these things. But we took it a step further. We asked, okay, why is this dish important to you? Why is this dish, a standard dish, where your heritage is from? So we could understand. Because yes, there are nuances in dealing with people, whether they're from whatever country on the planet. There's differences because of how they were brought up in
Hmm.
cultural norms. The the key thing is to have the comfort level and the safe space to bring to light or awareness that if somebody says something to you that makes you uncomfortable, that you have a safe space to say, that made me feel uncomfortable because of this. And
Hmm.
when you have that, then that creates an element of trust and a culture that everyone can be open. They can say, oh,
Hmm.
I did not mean it that way, but I can see how it was received. I am so sorry. I will, make sure that I don't do that again. Help me, on what I could have said differently that would have made it better. And approach that open, trusting, caring aspect of things. And even now, with this working remotely situation, we've all got those emails where we completely misread them, and we thought they meant one thing and they actually meant something else, because the tone is different.
Hmm.
Even on Zoom video calls, I
Hmm.
anticipate that we will still have some situations where someone may misinterpret somebody's facial features or
Hmm.
facial reaction as something where, you know, I could be looking here, and I could look over there and go, and you may think, okay, I said something to offend me. It's like, No, I'm looking over there because my dog just spilled, my drink, and I got to go clean that up. But I'm on a call, so I can't go over there to do it. You thought I was upset because of something I said. I'm upset because my dog jumped up on the table again. So, but if we don't verbalize it, then we don't know, and it all boils down to communication and making sure that you have a safe environment where people can comfortably say what they're experiencing and what they feel to make it a more healthy environment for everyone involved.
That is so important. I think as someone who works in that whole coach and train around that whole area of interpersonal wellness, there are so many silly misunderstandings and assumptions that people make that has caused long-term conflict where people are refusing to just clarify, oh, this is what I meant, oh, this wasn't what I intended. I mean, we're both Canadians, and I was actually quite shocked when last month when we saw what happened with Mr. Singh and an encounter that he perceived as racist and called it, and then the repercussion. I was absolutely, because as someone who's taught respectful workplace and harassment and anti-harassment and bullying, I'm teaching in regular workplaces, in government and private institutions, that respect and harassment is anything that anything that you say that it's demeaning or upsetting to the other person can be perceived as harassment. And here in our highest level of workplace, and he felt it was a racist gesture. Ask, oh, can you educate us? How was it perceived? What aspect of it? And I just felt that was such a teachable moment that was wasted on posturing and self-defense. And I was sitting here as someone who is teaching this, and I wanted an example to take to my training sessions and say to my students, my learners, here's what supposed to happen. I will still be sharing what's supposed to happen, but it was an excellent example of not how to do it.
Exactly, and that's an example you can still share it and say, this is
Exactly.
how not to do it, and this is the proper way to engage
Exactly.
in those things. And not to give anybody an excuse for improper behavior or things, saying things that would hurt others. I know during this time of a pandemic, there are some people that are really struggling with some things, and they may say things that they don't really mean, but they still say them. So they
Mhm.
have to you have to hold yourself accountable and own up to things that you say, if and have an open dialogue on it. Ultimately, the biggest life lesson that I've ever learned was seek to understand. Seek to
Mhm.
understand the other person's point of view on how they are viewing a situation or a matter.
Mhm.
Doesn't mean you have to agree with it, but at least gain that understanding where they're coming from and why they feel the way that they feel about that matter, to even the playing field a little bit. So it's not this us against them type of mentality. It's
Mhm.
okay, what can I do to help you in this situation?
Yeah, and how can we learn from this? How can we grow? And I think that's the whole idea of continuous improvement. We're not perfect. We are still growing, all of us. We are still learning, and there are things that I'm going to do that I'm still learning. I don't know everything. And I think that's when I think of well-being, if we could have a mindset shift that we're still learning, I think we would be happier, healthier, less stressed beings on the planet when we think, oh, I'm still improving in that area. I see you're still improving in that area. I will have some grace, and I will be understanding, and I will be encouraging and supportive. And I think that's where we're so quick to rush to judgment.
No.
And I think
Yeah.
that's a big part of it. So, Michael, tell me a little bit about, tell the audience a bit about the kind of work you do, who do you work with, and how can someone work with you if
Yep.
they're looking to, and the name of your podcast too, and how where we
Sure.
can find a hold of
Absolutely. We'll start off with the podcast. It's the Breakfast Leadership Show. It's available on all the major platforms, on Apple, Spotify,
Mhm.
iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Google, everyone. It's on some places that I didn't even know they were on, just because the way it's set up, it gets
Mhm.
picked up in a lot of different places. And I
Mhm.
interview some incredible thought leaders across the planet on a variety of different subjects, including burnout, but also in small business launching and how to communicate, how to do a lot of different things. So very fortunate to the show's been on for a little over 3 years now, and it's an amazing thing to do. As far as what I do and where I work with typically with teams, small teams, and go into their organizations and teach them some stress management and burnout prevention techniques, how to identify burnout in yourself and in others. So when I had my burnout, I was the last person on the planet that knew that I was burned out.
Mhm.
Everybody else knew I didn't. But a lot of times people that are burned out, they don't recognize they're burned out. So, teaching them, these are the common signs you can look for. These are some of the things you can do immediately to ease the stress of the burnout. And then, of course, there's more long term things that you need
Mhm.
to do to prevent burnout from happening again. Because as much as I would love to say burnout is a surface level kind of thing, it tends to
Mhm.
go fairly deep. And oftentimes it's because of choices, behaviors, thoughts, previous experiences. And that just kind of all adds up to a really big problem if you don't address it. So, small teams, Fortune 500 teams, to small business organizations, and just to get the work culture and the stress reduced. And the key thing is to make sure that the organization and the employees are on the same page with it. Because if it's just the employees that are trying to do something and the employers aren't buying it, or they don't see an issue with it, that's a brick wall that's very difficult to navigate. And I do work from time to time with individuals if their burnout situation is very specific or unique. If I don't work with them, then I have a team of associates across the globe that I refer to, depending on what their individual challenges are. Because burnout does look different for people, and
Mhm.
sometimes there's some additional things that they need. I refer to people U.S., the U.K., Canada, um, other parts of the world as well. So it's a case where if someone comes to our organization needing help, we're going to find them the right person for them to be able to navigate through their burnout. And um,
Mhm.
loving the journey on this. It's meaningful work. And as I joke with people, I wish that I didn't have this job. I wish that burnout didn't exist, but it does. And I'm
Yes.
thankful that I'm able to help and guide people, whether it's through my coaching, my show, my writing, speaking events, whatever the case may be, any way that I can help individuals and teams get past their burnout, it's my way of causing a ripple effect and making the world better.
So important. That is such an important thing to do. But something you mentioned earlier pricked me, and I just want to make that connection. How do you address compassion fatigue, or do you see it as one and the same, burnout and compassion fatigue in your work? Do you see them as separate, or do you actually blend them and show the similarities?
I believe it's two sides of the same coin in a way. Compassion fatigue, people pleaser. I'm a reformed people pleaser. I will publicly admit that. I would basically, I use this phrase a lot when I talk with my mom, because I think I inherited that from her. Is don't cut off your feet to give somebody your shoes. And you
A
can
good one.
you can give them your shoes, but keep your feet if you could. That way, when you go get new shoes, you know what size to get. Um, but yeah, I was always giving of others and giving of myself, but I was doing it to my own detriment. And
Mhm.
what I found is, if you focus on your self care and make sure that you are the best version of you can be, then when you do choose to give and you have the capacity to give and be compassionate to help others, they're getting a better version of you than they would before, because you're not empty trying to give them something. You are actually full, and you're able to give without causing any harm to yourself. Because no one should want to harm themselves to help somebody else out. They want to be able to help people and still be able to take care of themselves. And yeah, it's a common issue that I see with a lot of people that are caregivers, or nurturers or want to help, and they feel devastated about what's going on right now with a lot of people losing their jobs and all that. They feel horrible about this, and they want to do something about it, and they can, but they
Mm-hmm.
just have to do it without causing a detriment to themselves. Because if you do that, then that's great. And I found, in my own personal journey, sometimes when you give and then it comes time to receive back,
Mm-hmm.
you look around and you can't find anybody to give back. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, I had an interview yesterday with somebody that has gone through something like that, where they were a giver in life and was referred to as the rock. All their friends said, "You're the
Mm-hmm.
rock of this world." But when that rock needed help and she looked around for her friends to help, there was no one to be found. And that was a very difficult life lesson for her, to say,
Mm-hmm.
okay, instead of being this hard, firm, helping everybody type of person, do it, but make sure you're not taking it out on yourself. So that way,
Yes.
in times you do need help, then it
Mm-hmm.
goes both ways. And unfortunately, she had that experience, and I did too, to a certain extent. And it's much better to help with people when you can, and
Mm-hmm.
do it in a way where it's not harmful to your own self.
That's so important. We can't give what you don't have. You've got to
That's
be at
right.
a 10 for you to be able to give 9. You can't give, yeah, you can't give a 10 when you're at a 2. So
That's
remember
true.
people that. Yeah, absolutely. Michael, it's been a pleasure. I
Likewise.
enjoyed our conversation. So looking forward to having you at the summit and speaking on, are you speaking on leadership? Are you? Or are you going to speak on burnout or leadership? What perspective are you taking?
I'll probably do burnout proof your leadership is something. So I'll kind of blend both of them, because if your leadership can avoid burnout, that means your teams can avoid burnout, because they're
Yes,
going to set the example. Because
they
people
are.
mimic leadership. They look and
Yes.
say, okay, what's the behavior that our
Yeah.
bosses are doing?
Yeah.
If your bosses are not checking or sending emails after 5 o'clock or on weekends, then you
Employees
realize,
words.
okay, this is
So
this
true.
is how we do things here.
Yes.
And it
Yes.
just makes for a more healthy organization.
Yeah, we send the messages as leaders, and sometimes we don't. It is so subtle, and we don't even realize it. So it's very important to remind us of that. I
Absolutely.
like it. Looking forward to it. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Joyce.